Hello, my name is Elizabeth Dilling, and today I will be discussing seatbelts in teenagers. During this presentation, I will focus on the health behavior of seatbelt usage in the teen population. In the U.S. population as a whole, not everyone wears a seatbelt, but this problem is especially pertinent among teenagers. This behavior is problematic because motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death among the U.S. teen population. Of those deaths, more than half of the teens that died were not wearing seatbelts. Teens are 3 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash than other drivers, and 6 teens die every day because of motor vehicle crashes. Wearing a seatbelt is a behavior that can directly influence whether a teen is injured or killed in a car crash. There are several determining factors that affect teen seatbelt usage. Teens may be less likely to wear a seatbelt because developmentally they are in the stage of life that makes them more likely to be risk takers, rebellious, and impulsive. Their cognitive immaturity has been shown to play a role in their decision making. Parents also have a huge influence on their teens' driving behaviors. Not only are they typically the ones teaching their teens to drive, but parents' driving records have been shown to have a direct correlation to their teens' driving record when comparing risky behaviors. In addition, parents who set stricter driving limits on their teens report less risky behaviors. Peers also play a role in seatbelt usage. Teens are 20% less likely to wear a seatbelt if their peers do not wear one. Laws in a community also play a role. In 2019, only 86% of people wore a seatbelt in states with no seatbelt law or secondary enforcement laws, versus 92% of people in states with primary enforcement seatbelt laws. Of the theories discussed in this class, the value expectancy theories, along with the protective motivation theory, health belief model, and social cognitive theory all lend their hand at helping to better understand the behavior of seatbelt usage in teens. These theories have been used to not only analyze the behavior effectively, but develop successful interventions. Let's start by discussing the value expectancy theories. According to one study, perceived norms were positively associated with a teen's individual seatbelt use, drawing the conclusion that these perceptions, along with subjective norms, are a contributing factor toward teens' attitudes around using a seatbelt. This study also found that teenagers' lack of seatbelt use can be directly related to perceptions that their friends and peers do not use seatbelts, indicating again that subjective norms can be a predicting factor of behavioral intentions. Investigating further and looking at perceived accident severity and safety consciousness through the theory of planned behavior, it is evident that this has an effect on behavioral intent. The perceived threat of an injury when driving at a slower rate of speed may mean that the driver feels the seatbelt is not necessary, indicating a risk factor for not wearing a seatbelt. Finally, education has been found to be a protective factor in seatbelt usage. Students with more education on transportation had a more positive attitude towards seatbelt usage and were more likely to wear a seatbelt. Again, directly correlating education and knowledge with attitudes and concluding this construct to be a protective factor when analyzing this behavior through several theories. Although the constructs of the value expectancy theories do effectively address some of the determinants that affect seatbelt usage in teens, the constructs of the social cognitive theory have also been used to provide insight. The social cognitive theory addresses 2 important determinants of seatbelt usage in teens, which gives a better understanding of the behavior. First off, it answers how does the environmental factors such as laws influence safer driving habits, and how does knowledge influence seatbelt usage. It also allows for analyzing how perceived self-efficacy correlates. When analyzing what impacts seatbelt use for teens, an aspect to conceptualize is the reciprocal triadic causation, which draws the conclusion that a successful intervention will look at all areas that have an effect: the person, the behavior, and the environment. Shaping a community to increase the collective self-efficacy has been shown to have a direct effect on increasing individual seatbelt use. One study found that there was a 71% increase in seatbelt use when interventions focused not only on content knowledge, but procedural knowledge and skills, with peer-to-peer modeling being the most successful to increase self-efficacy. Other strategies that proved to show some effectiveness in increasing seatbelt usage involved parents and goal setting, along with rewards and incentives provided to teens for practicing safe driving. Overall, these key constructs of the social cognitive theory in this study point to the direct correlation between an increase in self-efficacy when addressing collective self-efficacy. A second study continues by looking into the socio-structural factors that play a role. The study showed that states that had implemented seatbelt laws and graduated license laws had an increase in seatbelt usage of 69%, showing that implementing these laws is a protective factor but not enough alone. Through continued evaluation of factors that influence seatbelt usage, key focus areas are increasing awareness about the laws along with further involvement from parents and communities. Again, it's evident that parents are a large factor in teens' safety behaviors. The environment has proven to influence teens' behaviors as well. Not only are teens unaware of the laws, but when fines are small for not wearing a seatbelt, they have an effect on the behavior. In addition, a percentage of parents have never addressed driving safely with their teens, providing further need to address this area with intervention. Through these studies, it appears evident again that knowledge is an important factor along with the social structural environment as an influence on behavior. The constructs of the health belief model and the protective motivation theory are also worth mentioning. The construct of response efficacy when addressing the effectiveness of wearing a seatbelt to prevent injury, along with self-efficacy for using a seatbelt and driving safely, provides further evidence of factors affecting seatbelt use. When these constructs have been studied, it has been found that when a driver views the severity as low and the reward as high, he or she has a low risk perception and is more likely to engage in risky driving behaviors such as not wearing a seatbelt. Thus, if a teen does not feel the threat of a motor vehicle accident is present, they are less likely to practice safe driving habits. Also, when fear appeals were used in one intervention to address this issue of perceived severity and threat, the results were that 21.1% of participants reported a change in behavior, including wearing a seatbelt, further indicating that increasing perceived threat can influence behavior change. However, it's important to note that these models not always are the best choice for interventions due to the various factors that can affect a teen's view of perceived threat. Continuing on to some theory-based interventions. One intervention that was done in order to address low seatbelt usage among teens was called Drive Alive. This intervention used the constructs of the theory of planned behavior and the theory of reason action to survey, implement an intervention, and evaluate the effectiveness. The program began by surveying the target population to see their beliefs about the use of seatbelts, and then continued by intervening in an attempt to create a culture of seatbelt use. In order to change attitudes around seatbelt usage, the results of the survey were posted on local media. Awareness was made by having more police officers present during school hours, and school principals were used to make public service announcements, taking away parking privileges to teens not wearing seatbelts. The goal of this was to create a perception of teens that the important people in their lives, such as police officers, school officials, peers, and parents, possess raised expectations for seatbelt usage. Education efforts made teens alert to facilitating factors around seatbelt usage, giving the teens perceived power to adopt the behavior of using a seatbelt. The program wanted to emphasize that the benefits of wearing a seatbelt outweigh the cost, utilizing incentives in social media to influence attitudes and subjective norms about seatbelt use, and by using education to give teens perceived behavior control. This intervention was successful in increasing seatbelt usage in teenagers. The average seatbelt use among the targeted population increased 23.3 percentage points after the intervention. The Drive Alive intervention was able to effectively apply the constructs of the theory to the behavior in order to get a successful increase in the behavior. Next, here are 2 additional effective interventions using the framework of the social cognitive theory to address the behavior. The first intervention's goal was to conceptualize building a safe driving environment in high schools to increase safe driving practices such as seatbelt usage for teens. The first construct of knowledge was addressed through raising awareness by teens and peers. The driver's self-efficacy was addressed through peer leaders who had decals on their cars and modeled good driving habits such as wearing a seatbelt, not using cell phones while driving, and following graduated license laws. The program was not only multi-informant involving teachers, students, administrators, parents, and the community, but also multidimensional in its intent to change the environment in the high school and teens' driving behavior together. In conclusion, the intervention proved that it was possible to change the climate of a school surrounding teen driving safety behaviors when addressing both student knowledge, self-efficacy, along with their environment as a whole. Noting that students included in the intervention showed positive effects on the constructs of both knowledge and self-efficacy and valued the increase in the safer driving environment created. The last intervention discussed begins with elementary and middle school students plus their community. The program starts with these students by providing knowledge and increasing self-efficacy and decision-making, which is then intended to carry over into future safety driving practices. Once the students transitioned to driving age again, the initial focus was knowledge but driving specific. The intervention focused on parents as coaches to increase their teen self-efficacy and to help them set goals along with providing consequences for unsafe driving habits. Overall, the families that participated in the intervention exhibited higher self-efficacy in managing and practicing safer driving habits, along with being more likely to set goals for their teens to continue to participate in safer driving behaviors. Again, both of these interventions were successful in changing the behavior by addressing knowledge, self-efficacy, and the teen's driving environment. Based on the research and interventions provided thus far, it's evident which theoretical constructs are best adapted to addressing this behavior. Through the use of several theories, it can be determined that an increase in knowledge and education about seatbelt and laws can effectively change attitudes, perceptions, and beliefs surrounding seatbelts, therefore having a positive effect on behavior change. It is also clear the environment, such as parents, peers, community, laws, and other socio-structural factors, play a role in the behavior change. And finally, it's evident that self-efficacy in regards to both personal self-efficacy and collective self-efficacy can be factors that affect behavior. Therefore, these are all theoretical constructs to consider in the development of an intervention. When developing an intervention, it's evident that several levels of the ecological model all should be part. When trying to change lack of seatbelt usage among the individual and within the community, some strategies that have been shown to be effective that I would use in an intervention include peer-to-peer education, fear appeals through vicarious experience, and role-playing to increase knowledge and the perceived threat to teens. In order to change perspectives and increase self-efficacy around seatbelts, have teens set goals with their parents using contracts. In addition, strategies should address teaching parents, coaching, and modeling techniques for safe driving behaviors that can then be used with their teens. I would use strategies to get the community and schools involved with social media campaigns and public service announcements in an attempt to affect the attitudes and beliefs of the teens and the community as a whole.